Hello, runners. This is message 2 for today. And in this message, I want to answer one question that keeps coming um, quite regularly to me, or definitely many of you have this question. And that question is, hey, coach, we are training for a half marathon or a full marathon, which is 13.1 miles or a 26.2 miles. And all this while, we have been told that the real half marathon or the real full marathon is not up to 10 mile, but from 10 to 13.1 miles. That's where the make or break happens. That's where the body sort of hits the wall and all that. So that's when the real race happens. So you say that on one side, but on the other side, you don't give us run more than 10 miles, or you don't give us runs more than 20 miles, max 22 miles, long runs. So how do we train for that important point where we all know that that's what makes or breaks a half or a full marathon journey? Why is it, or in a nutshell, why is it that we don't run the entire distance in training as part of training and then go and do the distance on the race day? Seems like a fair question, right? So let me give you some thoughts on this. It's important that we understand this. So the first thing I want to say, I'll break this into two parts. So the first thing I want to tell you is, let's just understand, why are we doing long runs first? Because unless we are very clear on that, we might we might be climbing the wrong sort of tree trunk. Why are we doing long runs? So I would say that the fundamental reason for long runs is two things. One is training you mentally to be at the job of running for long periods of time, right? It takes some time for your body and mind needs to get used to this running for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours continuously. And that's a mental training there. It's like a bit of a mental benchmark there. So you train your so by doing long runs on a structured, slowly increasing manner, we are training your mind that yes, you can run and be outside doing the same thing again and again for long periods of time. So that's a mental strength portion of that. The second important part of long run that we are trying to shoot for is what we call it as the aerobic development. Now, aerobic development is the core, as we've discussed earlier, is the core of all long distance running. So what is aerobic development? Aerobic development finally essentially comes down to a couple of things. One, more arteries being built up in your body so that the blood can go to various more parts of the body. Mitochondria improvement on your cells at a cellular level. So mitochondria is this sort of this composition inside your cell that's the powerhouse of the cell. So it's a known fact that as you keep running more and more, your cells starts have more and more of mitochondria inside at a cellular level. As a result, the cell is able to process energy a lot better and produce energy a lot better, and hence you are able to run in a lot more efficient manner. That's really what the mitochondria improvement is. So that's the second thing that's happening on aerobic development. And then the third thing is, because you're running in this sort of CP pace in an aerobic zone, which is oxygen rich environment, your body is able to learn to process the byproducts of running better. So that efficiency improves, which is great. And also your body is able to metabolize fat better, the energy pathways to fat, burning fat and running. It learns how to do that as you're running in CP over a long period of time. And as a result of that, better energy pathways from the stored fat gives you longer time before you start going out of energy. And then finally, it also improves your heart. Heart muscles get strengthened, lungs. If you see all of this put together, is what we call it as aerobic development. Fantastic stuff happens. Inside out transformation happens. And because of this inside out transformation, you're getting better and better as a runner. And all of this inside out transformation happens during the long run, because you're running for sufficient amount of time in a aerobic sort of zone, and your body is getting tuned to this sort of a setup. So that's the second goal, if you think about it, coming back to my original point. So a long run has two goals: aerobic development and mental strength. Now, so that keep that as one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is the question: till what time will this aerobic development and mental strength training improve? If I run for 2 hours, let's say the aerobic development increases by X%. If I run for 4 hours, does it increase by 2X%? If I run for 6 hours, does it increase by 3X%? We need to understand that, right? So that question, a lot of research, a lot of understanding is that if senior coaches, there is a line of thought that anything after 2 hours of continuous running, the aerobic development actually ceases. In fact, in some cases, it might even go down. And mental strength also starts plateauing, like mental strength development. So if you think about it, what does the research say? That anything after 2 hours of running continuously, you don't really get any aerobic development that much. If you don't get that much aerobic development, and your mental strength is also not sort of building after that, then what is really happening then? The return on your effort, return on your long run effort, as measured by improvements in aerobic development or mental strength improvement, is sort of going down. While that is happening, the risk of injury is increasing. Muscles begin to start wearing down because you're running longer and longer. And your recovery that is needed after a long run, excuse me, before you go to the next run, increases. That means you do a long run today and you run for 6 hours, 7 hours, then you need 3 days of recovery before you can come back to strength run. Sorry, guys. So those things are happening. So as a result, the return on effort of your long run after a certain point actually becomes negative. So if you combine all of this together, let's say you run a 10-minute mile on an average. That means in a 10-mile run of 10 minutes is what? 100 minutes. So about a little more than 1.5 hours, 1 hour 40 minutes. Or in other words, if you're running 15 minutes a mile average, then your 10-minute is what? 1.5 hours, 2.5 hours. So if you run a 10-mile run, you're anywhere between 1.5 hours to 2.5 hours you're running, right? And if you're in a full marathon training, you're running anywhere between 2.5 hours to 4 hours, depending on the distance, up to 20 miles, 4.5 hours. So already when you run 20 miles, a typical novice runner runs for 4.5 hours. Lot more than the 2 hours and 3 hours we talked about. So already at mile 20, the body is sort of getting, very less aerobic development, and the risk of injury is also increasing quite a bit. In fact, that's why we see in full marathoners, many of them have some injuries during peak mesocycle. It's something which everybody has to think about, especially novice runners. So that's why I'm saying that the return on effort after a certain distance is not really helping you. So that means, how do you train for that last 3 miles or the last 6 miles? The way you train for the last 3 miles or the last 6 miles is run the last 3 miles or run the last 6 miles. What I mean by that is, if the last 3 miles or the last 6 miles is characterized by your body getting exhausted, and still you have to do the 3 miles. So that's why for senior runners, let's say ultra marathoners, what we would do is that we would ask them to do a long run the previous day and then come back and do another long run the next day. The long run distance will be only 15 miles or 17 miles on both sides. But the second 17 mile is you're running before the body could recover. Or in other words, you're simulating really the last 20 miles of ultra marathon. That's really how the logic works. So if you guys want to, I know I don't recommend that, but if you guys are thinking like, how do I train for the last 3 miles for a full half marathon, then what you do is do a strength exercise a little bit, or don't do first thing in the morning when you're fresh. Do your long run sometime in the afternoon when you've done other chores of work and your legs are a little tired, and then go and do your long run. In that way, you are getting more and more trained towards running the last 3 miles during the 10-mile run. So that's what I would say, guys. So in summary, what I wanted to say is, no training would ever ask you to run the entire distance, because the return on effort for running the entire distance is very low after a certain point of time. So typically, the aerobic development and the mental strength training that you gain by running 10 miles or 20 miles for a full marathon is sufficient for you to run the race. And during the race, there is additional adrenaline that flows, and as a result, you get another 2 or 3 miles, like free 2 or 3 miles you will get during the race. So you can might as well use that. See, the goal here is, maximizing the return on effort, not minimizing it during the training, and thereby increasing the risk of injury. So that's the balance we play. We want to play a balance where you don't get injured and you also get to the race day without injury and pain. So what's the highest probability of getting there is the 10-mile run and the 20-mile run. Hope that makes sense. And good luck on your next week. And let's go and finish the peak mesocycle with a smile. Take care, guys.